I heard it's an issue. And I live. Right.
Well, it's letting me share my screen. I don't know if anybody can actually see it.
No, it's coming up on my end.
Okay, so you're seeing. Oh, I guess.
Turn both off? Nope. Yeah.
Or
I don't know if sound is going through or not.
let's ask a few people.
All right, well, my speakers seem to be detecting something. Can anybody hear?
Not some checking. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. They can hear, they can see.
All right.
If I steal the thing for a second.
Which thing?
Just going to show my desktop.
Go for it. See? Shoot, where's mute?
No, it's not.
Oh, you got it.
All right, I'll talk to it. Do that. Let that happen.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're going to get started in a few minutes. I'm going to show you guys the backlog, but I'll just kind of talk to it a little bit. So today our topic is going to be the Linux command line tool. That's going to be pretty cool. The next time on the 21st, we'll be talking about containers, how they're used here in the NAS environment and real-world situation. So that should be pretty cool. We have 47 other topics in the backlog, everything from multi-threading to conversion and Git and that sort of thing. So if anyone wants to pick one of those topics, I'll send a link out to where these topics are and where everything is in the pipeline. We have 5 different sections. The ones that are just in the backlog, the ones that are being planned, the ones that are assigned but they don't have a date when they're going to go out, and the ones that have been scheduled, and then the ones that have been completed. We have notes for all the ones that have been completed. The link for that will be in the notes as well. We try to record these now, but it's kind of hit or miss. So we try to stream them so if you're not able to be here physically, you can still kind of participate. Again, that's hit or miss. All depends on how Hangout is working that day, or WebEx, or whatever we can get our hands on to try to stream the content out. You don't have to be an expert to present. You just have to be willing to get up and speak in front of the group for about 5 or 10 minutes. It's not that bad. Most of the people that have presented multiple times. Christine's presented at least 3 times, I believe.
Have I? Really?
Yeah, yeah. So it's not that bad, see? So it's a pretty good way of forcing yourself to learn something as well, which is pretty cool. A lot of topics I've spoken on before. I knew of the topic, but I didn't know the topic before I really signed up for it. And then I just used that time in between to kind of get a cursory knowledge on it. And a couple of times other people in the room have known a little bit about it, and they help jump in and say, okay, yeah, that's correct, but this is more correct. And it's been pretty good. Everyone ends up learning that way, which is pretty cool. With that, one last thing, I always forget this. The pizza is provided by the PAC contract, so I want to just give them a shout out. That the RSVP, why I asked everyone to RSVP is so that we know how much pizza we need to get beforehand, and we also know if we need to get a different room. So I think a few times, maybe the last time, we had the Ruby Talk, we had like chairs all in the aisle here, people standing up, people with like Indian style down the front. Which we can avoid that if we know how many people are coming. We can get a bigger room.
The notification in the message that I saw said like RSVP, but they haven't been.
Yeah, so it should have. Sometimes that gets messed up, so I'll make sure. Because once I put it in, I don't even go and check it unless someone sends me an email and say, "Hey, this is wrong." But I'll definitely do that. Make sure it's in there. Any other feedback you guys have to make the group better? We're definitely open to it. Like, we've changed a number of things based on feedback, and it's gotten better every time. So we're definitely open to feedback. With that, Christine is going to be our presenter today, so we'll let her take it away.
Hello. Apparently I've done this a lot before, so probably you recognize me. So I'm going to be talking about the Linux command line, and specifically about how to kind of like dig through text files, which I find myself doing more often than I thought I ever would. So I'm just going to first start with my background, because a couple other people have done that, and it's actually been very useful because it kind of gave me an idea of like where they were coming from. Then also, if I can get a little more about other people's background in terms of like, have you ever been in Linux before, for example? Talk about sort of the problem definition, the assumptions I started with when I created this presentation. Then I'm going to go through this sort of subset of Linux tools. Some of these I'm going to do live, so you get to see me type. Don't laugh too hard. And then I'll have a little summary at the end. I also, is Mark here? So Mark Pohl, who's on who does a lot on Slack, he actually took a look at this on Monday and gave me some really great suggestions, I think most of which I was able to incorporate. So I just, sorry?
Marcin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he went by Mark. I apologize. Marcin, yes. So thank you. So my background. When I was in college, we did C and C++, Java. I did a little bit of IDL and Perl on Linux. Actually, it may have actually been Solaris. It's been a while. I don't remember. Then after college, I worked in C and C++, Java on Windows. So I left the Linux world for a while. Then I was back in grad school for quite a while. And that was on Windows, and our sort of servers were Linux. And then back here at Goddard, it's been programming basically exclusively on Linux. So my background is that I've used Linux a lot, but I am not an expert, and I've never been a sysadmin, so I've never been on that side of things. I've been an end user. So I guess who here is familiar with Linux? Like, you've done stuff in Linux. Okay, great. Who here has been like a sysadmin like level? Okay, right. So don't laugh too hard at these. And I assume that if you haven't done Linux, then you've probably at least done Windows command line. You know what a command line is. So without further ado, the problem here I'm talking about is like, you know, you come in and the server, something is going on with the server, and you have to dig through the Apache logs or whatever to figure out what's going on. For me, it's mostly Apache logs, and they're huge. So you have to do something to filter out the stuff that is unimportant to get at the stuff that is important. Anybody else had that experience of Apache log filtering? Somebody, yes, okay, yes, all right, so. So I'm assuming you're familiar and have used a command line in some OS somewhere. So you're familiar with things like cd, ls, you know, glob syntax, like, you know, basics. So less. So I used to know about more, but less is better than more, weirdly. And this is like what you use to view a text file. So it's interactive. You type less in the file name, and it shows you the stuff in the file. So Q to quit, it's always P. You need to be able to get out of it. Slash, and then you can enter a search term if you're looking for something in the file. G goes to the beginning, Shift G goes to the end, page up and page down work, which is nice because they don't anymore. Arrow up, arrow down, and you know, just look it up. There's tons of stuff about less, but if you haven't used less, use less. And then -R is a useful command line option because if you use grep to color things and you want to pipe it to more, this is how you do it. And I guess I'll have to change all of these to say Marcin instead of Mark because he does not go by Mark. So this was totally awesome. I did not know this before Monday, but I will be showing how to do it. So then head. You know, super basic. Head gives you, oddly enough, the top of the file. If you say -25, it'll give you 25 lines, defaults to 10. So I'm sure there are other useful options. I have not used them. Again, you know, use the man page for these and you'll find out a lot more. Tail gives you the end of the file, which is often crucial for log files. This one, the last 25, you can specify the number of lines. And -F, this is one that I didn't know until, I can't remember, 5 years ago or so. So if you have like some log that's still being written to and you want to watch as it's being written to, then -F it'll keep scrolling to show you what's happening. Very, very useful. Right. So Mark tells me there's this, Marcin, sorry, tells me there's this thing called multi-tail, which I had never heard of. He says it's awesome. And better than head and tail combined. So look it up. I didn't have a chance to look it up between then and now, but I will be looking it up soon. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be one of those things you get with a standard Linux installation, so it wasn't on our server. So real basics, looking at the file. Okay, so cat. So this one I think stands for concatenate. So basically, you know, you get a bunch of files and it just reads them and prints them to standard out, which is super boring, yet useful, very useful. You know, so you end up with, you cat a file and it just shows you what's in the file. If you do -N, it gives you the line numbers. Apparently -V will mark up non-printable characters. I use it mostly to pipe things to other command line tools, honestly. And this was also Mark. I did not know about this -V option. So I haven't had to work with Windows files in a long time, you know, where they have that annoying extra end of line thing. So maybe if I had to do that. Find. All right. So let me get this out here. So find is for finding files under some directory. So if you're at, say, a top level here, I can do a find space. Find dot means look in this directory, space -name star.csv. And it shows me all the files that fit that pattern. So this is extremely useful when you're digging through, you know, a big directory. It takes some time, but if there's a lot of files. So let's see next. Useful options. That -name pattern. It's glob patterns. I don't know if you can do regex. Then -type, a lot of times, you know, you're either looking for files or you're looking for directories, so you can specify that. I think there's some other options there. Page is your friend, or actually Google is your friend with examples, because sometimes the man page is like totally incomprehensible. Pipe. Okay, so this is the heart of any complicated command line thing, is the pipe. And what it does is it takes the output of one command and it pipes it so it's the input of another command. So a lot of times, you know, you might be able to do something that you want to do in one command, but it's often easier to do it with multiple commands, or it's just impossible to do with one command. So like here, right, find, but it scrolled because there were too many files. So I can now pipe it to less. And now I'm in less, and I can, you know, move around if I want to, and, you know, search for whatever. So pipe, be using it like all over the place. Every Linux command I've run across can handle input from a pipe. That doesn't mean that they all can, but I don't know, anybody ever known a standard Linux command line tool that doesn't accept pipe as input? All right, there you have it. So it's basically, you can use it for just about anything. Xargs, okay, so Xargs is basically something that allows you to do a for each. So let me see, where am I? Okay, so here I have like a bunch of files. And so let's suppose that what I want to do is look at the first 2 lines of every CSV file here. So now they're all CSV, but let's just, for the sake of argument, imagine that they aren't all CSV. Okay, so we're going to find all the CSV files. And then we're going to write xargs head space -2. So this says for every line that find outputs, run head space -2 on that line. And then I pipe it to less. So here we go. I have the first 2 lines of every file. Did that make sense?
The XRs thing, what is it again?
It's a for each. It's basically a for each. So it takes every line of output from the previous thing and passes it to that command. So in this case, find gives me the path for every CSV file, and so it calls head space -2 on every CSV file. Very, very useful. Right, so the basic idea, as I said, it just runs against each line. By default, it executes whatever that command is after the xargs, and then dumps each line after that. But there's a whole lot you can do with this. It can consume more than 1 line at a time. You can tell it, like if you don't want the line at the end of the command, if you want it like in the middle of the command, you can specify it. Google for more info. Which is really the case with all of these, because there's so much in these commands that, you know, I don't know all of it, and we'd be here all day. grep. Okay. So the next extremely useful tool in your arsenal, is grep. Okay. So there's going to be some gratuitous catting here, because I'm sort of pointing out that you can you can sort of have these commands one after another. Also, I just like to do it this way, even if it's less efficient than other ways. So cat star.csv. So what this does is it prints out all the lines in all the CSV files. And then I'm going to grep. Okay, so this says color the results, which is awesome, and I did not know existed before this week. And then these files, I should have said this actually before. So I'm not showing you our Apache logs, because our sysadmins would get very upset if I did. These are files showing what the inputs were to our Giovanni tool each day. So it's got stuff like what variables people were asking for. So trim is one of our is a satellite that has data products that people are very fond of. And so this, what I'm telling grep to search for is any line that has trim precipitation in it. And so if I just hit enter, you can see there's tons and tons and tons of stuff. And it's colored. So if you do a less space minus F, sorry, R, not R, not F. This is so cool. So now it's highlighting for you where that expression matched in the line. So this is awesome. Okay, sorry, the coloring, I'm just like, it's just so cool. All right, so did that make sense, what we did there? Okay.
So when you say color, it's kind of highlight the
Highlight.
part that matches.
That match that expression,
Okay.
That's
And
right.
the rest of it is just the line that that expression was on.
Exactly, exactly. So, so useful options, minus V. So sometimes you want to actually filter out certain things. So minus V is, you know, rather than pulling out everything that matches, pull out everything that doesn't match. Minus I says ignore case, which can also be useful. Minus C changes the behavior, so it tells you how many lines it found that matched your criterion. Did I get that right? I think so. So like if it matches more than once in the line, I think you only get one count. Although I could be wrong on that, but it's useful. And this minus minus color equals always says color the stuff that matches my expression. So grep is really useful in combination with other things. So in this first one, we're going to find all the files under this directory that are text files. So this find gives you the file names. And then we're going to grep space minus V, so get rid of all the file names that have the string unwanted in them. So this is working on the file names. That's an example. And then in the next one, for example, we're going to, again, find all the files with the name, with all the text files, and then we're going to run xargs. Now, so here, now we're running grep on each file individually, so the text of the file as opposed to the file name, if that makes sense. And then I'm telling it to count the number of times, how many lines in these files have the word interesting in them. And then this grep space minus V colon 0 just says filter out all the ones that don't have the line interesting in them. So this will tell me, give me a list of the files that have the word interesting in them. So it's very useful in combination. Most of these are useful in combination with other things. And there's also many ways. This is not the only way to do this. You may be able to get away with doing this all in one line with grep. But sometimes it's useful to kind of just build the expressions up as you go. So does that make sense?
So the second graph there.
Yep.
Is where, can you explain that one more time on that? Might not have been paying attention.
Yeah, so this is a little confusing. Okay, so pipe takes the output of this expression and passes it to the next expression. So in this case, find is basically just going to output one file path per line. And then grep is going to look at the name on the list. It's actually going to take that whole output from find, and it's going to go line by line and find and filter out anything that has unwanted in it. So this will filter out the file name. In this one, we're throwing in xargs. So what happens is for every line in find, it actually calls grep space minus C interesting and that file path. And so then grep will look in the file itself and count the number of times it sees interesting, or count the number of lines that have the word interesting in it.
Remove the ones that don't.
And then this will remove the ones that have 0 instances of the word interesting. So you know, once you play with these a little, it becomes more obvious. Yes, right. So this is going to be fun because at some point I'm going to type something wrong when I'm giving examples.
So in that bottom example, are you getting path names or are you just getting number?
Yes, so in this bottom example, you'll actually get path names. So here, let me, okay. So let's look here. So if I, oops, sorry. Okay, so there's my CSV files. So we're going to do an xargs rep of one of our products, NLDAS. And, oops, sorry, it's hard to see with this Hangouts thing here. Oh, how?
Always the right.
Or close enough. Okay. Where was I? Minus C. Oh, gosh. So, oops. Always helpful to end your. Okay. So here what it did is it's telling me that in this file there were 122 lines with NLDAS in it. So, but this one had 0 instances of NLDAS. So if I do a grep space minus B colon 0, now it's removed that entry that had 0 instances. Okay. So moving on, awk. So awk can do a lot of things. And I don't know what all it can do, but I do know it's super useful for getting a column out of something. So in here, let's use gratuitous usage of cat file. Awk space minus F. Capital F, comma, and then this syntax here I always have to look up. 7. So 7 is the 7th column. And let's see how that goes. All right. So this gets out the 7th column of the data. Which, as you can see, is not terribly interesting for a lot of them. So, you know, and then you can pipe it to less if you want to, and you'll see stuff. And set minus F by default. I think it uses white space, so you can set the delimiter, and the delimiter can be a regex. Another one of those things that I didn't know before Monday. It's got tons of functionality. Feel free to Google. And again, Marcin was the one who told me that this can be a regex, which is super cool. Yeah, I mean, like you can do I think you can do like for loops in there, and who knows what else. Awk is very powerful. Said. All right, so.
Could you go back to awk?
Sure.
The command.
Sorry?
The actual command.
Yeah.
So this is just printing the 2nd column.
It is.
So if there are 8 columns, it will only print the 2nd one.
Yep.
Can you print like 2 through 8 or 2 through 6?
You can. I don't know the syntax off the top of my head, but you totally can. It's one of those things, like I always have to look it up if it's more than just printing 1 column, but yes, you can.
It's either colon $8 or colon or comment.
It has a full print definition, so you can get as fancy as you want. The print command will print things separated by the default field separator. But if you want to get crazy and reorder, it's really nice to reorder the fields in a line. Because you can print them out in a different order than
So, like I said, lots of functionality. Feel free to Google. Right. So, sed, which is used to transform text. I have to use my cheat sheet here or I will screw this up. It's printed out of order for some reason. Okay. So, once again, use cat instead of effects. It's not really necessary. Because a lot of these commands, you can just pass the file to it. You don't have to pass it by a standard in. But yeah. So we're going to do another one of these awk. We're going to get out in this, this time the second column. Or seventh column, never mind. Which happens to be the shapes column. And as I showed before, a lot of the times people don't have to select a shape in this case, so a lot of these are none. So we can remove the nones. That's better. And we can also remove the column header. And there's, I'm sure, a better way of doing this. I'm showing here, but it does work. Okay. So now the magic of sed. These, as I said, are shapefiles, and what I'm showing here is that somebody asked for the 171st shape in the State Department countries. Shapefile. So a shapefile can have a lot of sort of vector shapes, geographic shapes. So let's suppose actually what we want to know is just the shapefiles themselves, and we don't want the stuff after the slash. Oops. So now I'm going to attempt to write this correctly. Let's see how that goes. And we will use sed for that. So sed. If you're familiar with regex, this is going to look super familiar. So because we're trying to get rid of the backslash, we have to escape it. So what we're going to do is remove everything after the slash and everything after it. So we're going to replace it with nothing, which is what this means. Et voila. So sed is for regex stuff. So like, for example, in that previous one that I was showing where it was saying, you know, these files have counts of how many times they had that string. If I wanted to then just get the file path again, I could use sed to remove the colon blah, blah, blah on the end. Very, very useful. Okay. Did that make sense? Hopefully. Who's used a regex here? Most people, a lot of people. So if you've never used regex, I highly recommend looking it up because it's very, very useful.
One problem with regex, try to solve regex, and then you have two.
Yes.
Three.
Yes. Did you see the cartoon that I posted? There's an XKCD.
Like 2 days ago. Like, I just came up. Okay.
Yes, yes. So it's very easy to shoot yourself in the foot. So if you change all the Chris's to Christopher, and then there's my name in there, you'll end up with so you know, you have to be careful and you have to know what your inputs are going to look like. But still very useful. This is awesome. The sed grimoire. I go to it because whenever I forget syntax or I have syntax issues, like I recommend it. Okay, WC space -L. So I think WC stands for word count. L, it counts lines instead. I don't think I have ever used it without -L because I have never cared how many words there were. I've mostly cared how many lines. So, like if you want to know how big a file is, boom, WC space -L. Okay, Perl. So this one I also did not know until recently, or well, I guess 5-6 years ago. You can actually run a little piece of Perl code at the command line on each line of input. So really, you can go wild here and create something that nobody will ever understand after you. But you know, sometimes you just want a for loop, or you just want to call some nice little command. So this is the way you do it. So in this example here, Perl regex, which you might recognize, to replace commas with space dash 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 space, because why not? And it's going to replace all of them, which is what the G means. And then it's going to print the results and then pipe to less. So really anything you can do with a Perl expression, you can do here. And so if you're familiar with Perl, that can be useful. So if all you want to do actually is run a regex, then Perl space -PE will actually just print the output of your regex for you. So I had NE here. I sometimes find that there's things I can do with a Perl regex that I can't do with a sed regex, apparently because I am unfamiliar with all the awesomeness that is sed. But if you are familiar with Perl, then this may be useful. Okay, so sort and unique, which often go together. Okay, so I'm going to once again cat all the CSV files here. And then this time I am going to print the first column, which happens to be the workflow status. So you can see here that we're mostly successes, but some failures. So if what I want to do is find out how many successes, how many failures were there, I can first remove the header, which I'm sure there's a better way of doing this than that. And then I'm going to sort. So, yeah. So, okay. So this is all of them sorted alphabetically, which is what you need to run unique on. So if I just do this with unique, you can see that there's these 4 different kinds of status. Someone canceled it. It was a failure. It was in progress, which meant it was running when this cron job ran, or success. And so if I do unique space -C, then it actually gives me the counts for each of these. It tells me that it was mostly success. Woo! And then if I do another sort on that, and I specify that I want to sort the things as numbers, it shows me that it was mostly success.
Do you need that first sort for the unique code?
You do, yeah. Unique expects things to be sorted. So this is, I use this all the time, this sort, pipe to unique, pipe to sort. Okay. Right, so the lines have to be sorted for unique to work, or at least as far as I know they do. Maybe there's some command line option to unique that says, hey, this is not sorted. So as I said, -N will sort things numerically as numbers rather than alphabetically, so that you get like 1 and then 2 and then 100 rather than like 1, 100, and 2. And unique minus C will tell you how many occurrences there were. All right, any questions? Okay, so,
Oh, wait.
yeah.
I didn't want to see this. What's the difference for C?
So if you sort numbers alphabetically, then, and your three numbers are 1, 2, and 100, it will sort it as 1, 100, 2, because the number 2 is after 1, alphabetically. Whereas if you do a minus n, then it will interpret those strings as numbers, and you'll get 1, 2, 100. It's like immediately obvious, like if you try it, you know, you're like, hey, why is that? Oh, okay. All right, so redirect. I'm assuming most people know this exists, but just to make sure. In this example, I redirect to the standard out to a file. So sometimes you want to store this stuff for later.
What's the difference between the single redirect and the double? Sometimes you see arrow.
That is a good question.
So the single
Okay.
will overwrite an existing file.
Yes,
and
this
the
will
double
overwrite.
adds to it?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
learn something every day. Thank you. You can separately redirect standard out and standard error. You can redirect standard out to standard error and vice versa. You can redirect them both to a file. I find that this site here has lovely examples for every one of those, because I can never remember which one, like 1 ampersand 2 something something. Maybe if I did this every day, but I don't. Yeah. So it's got the redirect standard out to a file, standard error to a file, standard out to standard error to standard out, so it's got all the combinations. T. All right, so this one is really useful. Sometimes you want to write the thing to standard out to a file, but you also want to see it in front of you. And so what T does is it prints to standard out and the file. Very useful. For example, I'm doing something and outputting it to output.txt, which you can see here exists after I run the command, but it also printed everything to standard out. So on those occasions where you want to save it off somewhere and watch simultaneously, use T. All right, so this is what I call command line insanity. And it isn't really, but just to show how you can create something that gets quite complicated. All right, so let's suppose we want to answer the question, how many times were trim variables requested in May? So if you look here, I have daily files. So first we're going to start with cat, and we're going to get all the files from May of this year. And then we're going to grep for the lines that contain the word trim. So let me just pipe this to less. Okay, so all of these lines have the word trim. So now we are going to get out the line with the variables, which is the column with the variables, which is not the third column. Wait, I got this syntax right. Okay. What you notice here is that people can select more than one variable at once, and so in this particular file, the variables are semicolon separated in our comma separated file. So if I just go ahead and count the number of lines here, I'm going to get the wrong answer because this person actually requested 2 trim variables. So now we're going to use Perl. Woo!
It's a capstone project that uses every single
You know, I did my best. I did my best. I was like, okay, what can I do that uses as many of these as possible? Okay. You know what? I think I actually had this typed in somewhere else because the first time I tried to type it without, yes, okay. Tried to type this. Okay. Yes, right? Okay, so here we go. If you're familiar with Perl, what this does is it splits the line on the semicolon, and then for each thing in that array, it removes any end of line that may or may not be there, and then it prints the variable with an end of line. So now, if you look here, they've been separated into separate lines, which is awesome.
You can type Perl in. Is there other languages that you can use instead of Perl?
Awk is a language.
Well, yes, right.
Python has the -c.
I mean, this is a function. This is something that is specific to the Perl interpreter. It's not something that's really Bash. It's the Perl interpreter. So other interpreters may have this capability. Okay. So where was I? Okay. So now, right. So if we look here, you should see. So there's some lines here that are now no longer trim because they were, you know, it was like somebody picked a trim variable and an OMI variable. So we're going to remove, oops, we're going to search for trim again. And then we're going to sort, and we're going to find occurrences, and then we're going to sort. Okay. So here we have in May the counts for all the trim variables that people requested from our system. Dun dun. Okay. So, and you can obviously come up with things that are even more complicated than this. I don't recommend it. Like even this, like nobody's going to know what you're doing here if you just put this somewhere. Okay. So, in summary, less, look at the file. Head and, whoops, begging end of the file. Dang it. Okay, I'm not going to try and edit it right now. I'll fix that later. Hello. Head and tail get you the beginning and the end of the file. Cat puts the entire file on standard out. Find finds files that match a pattern. The pipe strings the commands together. Xargs runs the same command on each element of the list. Lets you find stuff with regex. Okay, actually, glob. Sorry, I'll have to fix that too. Sed, you can use regex to modify stuff. Awk. You can do lots with awk. I use it to get out individual columns, and or I have gotten multiple columns out before. -L count lines. This Perl thing, as I said, is a function of the Perl interpreter, but you can run simple Perl commands on each line. Sort to sort things that you have. Unique to reduce them to the unique entries. Redirect outputs to a file, and T, redirect and write to the screen. So that's what I had. And these notes will be posted so you can see. But really, once you know that these things exist, you just Google them and you can find how they work.
Your whole career.
Yeah. I don't know. So this is, I use Bash. I haven't used any other shell in a long time. So other people who use other shells, I would think that these exist in other shells.
All of these commands are Unix executables.
Okay.
The shell is just running the executable.
There you go.
The syntax of things like output redirection, shell programming, which we didn't get into, they vary depending on the shell you have. Most shells are compatible with the Bourne shell, which is the POSIX standard. There's also the C shell, which came from Berkeley, which is not used as much. But if you learn the bash shell, what you learn about that will apply almost everywhere.
So I would like to mention that, you know, I use this for like the stuff for quick and dirty, like find out what the heck is going on right now. I've never had like shell script in production, really. Not a huge fan of shell scripting. So, but for when you're at the command line trying to find things, it's so much faster to do this than to like try and write a Python script or something that's going to do it, which takes forever. So, yeah.
What limits have you found at any of these commands? Since how many lines can it do before you get out of memory or you get?
You know, it's interesting. I have, for example, grepped through the last, I don't know, 500,000 lines of the Apache server
Which is a couple
logs.
gigs.
So they're actually pretty darn fast, and they can handle quite a lot. So I doubt that they hold everything in memory. I mean, you don't have to, right, unless you're sorting or something. So they're pretty powerful. You can run these on, I don't know, somebody else. Does anybody else want to?
Things that are command line oriented, as long as they don't have to remember a previous line for
Right.
reason, like sort does,
Right,
then they're essentially unlimited.
right,
Awk processes each line as it reads it. It can
Right.
read a trillion lines. There is a limit on the length of a shell command
Yes.
line. It's very long now. It's like a megabyte. But that's the reason.
Right.
Well, that's a lot better than 10K, which is what it was in ancient times.
Right.
And that's actually why XArgs exists. XArgs carves up the list of files you hand it. It's not larger than the maximum size the shell can process in a single invocation of the program. So when you send XArgs a whole list of files, it runs that program on as many of those files as it can without exceeding the limit of the command line length. That's what XArgs was originally intended for.
there you go.
The very old versions of Awk will choke at around 100 columns.
I've never had anything quite that big. So, I mean, you know, I'm using it for things like, okay, do we have some eager beaver user who's decided to like request 200 plots at the same time? Yes, this IP seems to be overly, you know, killing our machine right now. So, right. So that was all I had. Yeah.
Let's see. Concurrency. Does any of them now allow concurrency?
In what way?
Multiple threads, multiple.
The concurrency primitive that's been in the shell forever and ever is just running things in background. I don't know of any more sophisticated form of that. The shell has always had a very linear pipeline mentality to it. And, there's kind of stuck with that.
And the operating system's pretty robust in that manner. Linux Unix,
Right.
multiple threads, upgrades, you're good.
Okay. Well, I think we're done then. Hopefully that was informative. And certainly anybody who knows more is more than welcome to do another one that's more sophisticated than this intro.
Thank you, Christine. Appreciate that. Definitely, if some, there's a number of people in here that really sound like they really know about it. So if you want to do a follow up, we did that with Git, where we had, I think,
3 or 4.
We had 3 or 4 series every time, getting more and more sophisticated, and it was really useful, especially for people getting to learn it or people that were intermediate on it, and they still, every time someone came, you can learn something new. Just
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
So that definitely encourage that. We only have one other scheduled talk presentation in the pipeline, so it's easier for me if we get a number of those scheduled out ahead. if someone falls off, I can kind of add taking backfill or whatever the case may be. That way we can keep the consistency every 2 weeks that we have this, and it's every 2 weeks that we have something valuable. We don't just want to come in and say, "Oh, what are you?" No, then people don't come back after that. We'll make sure every time we have it that it's valuable content. So thank everybody for coming out. If you haven't signed the sign-in sheet, please do so. That is very important.